So we're coming up to the EU referendum. EU referendum. Okay, straw poll. Anyone brave enough to say you want to stay in? It's the rat poison. I know there's some great reasons for staying in. You know, from the environmental standpoint, from the European Convention on Human Rights standpoint. You know, I use these things in my recent appearances in court. You know, I'm not going to not use them while I have the opportunity. But it's the sugar coating on the cyanide. Now, it is going to be manipulated, that's for sure. You know, there's not one shadow of doubt about that. But the key element of this, anybody who says that, you know, we should stay in, and like I said, you know, I understand if you just look at the surface elements, there's a lot of potentially, apparently, good reasons for staying in. But who sets the EU legislation? Who sets the EU legislation? Huh? See, we're not sure, are we? How long have we been in the EU? Too long. Since Edward Heath lied to the people of the country in 73 and 4 about the potential of joining the European Economic Community. I was 18. It was my first opportunity to vote. And I thought, this is great. This is a great opportunity to be part of something bigger. It's your fault. It's my fault. Because we got in by just one vote, and it was my vote. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. With my superficial analysis, i.e. none, of what this really entailed back in 1975 when we had the vote. But, you know, 40-odd years on, you know, we really haven't got too much excuse, and the information is a lot more readily available. The reality is that the legislation in the EU comes from a multiple range of sources. Officially, it comes from the Council of Ministers. Down through, because even the commissioners, I mean, listen to what Tony Blair has to say about the role of the commissioner and the inability of the commissioner to be able to initiate the process of new legislation. Actually, where it originates from is the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats, the faceless people in Brussels and Strasbourg who create the legislation, their pet legislation, often on behalf of powerful lobbyists, and they know the channels by which to get the Council of Ministers to rubber stamp the approval process. How many pieces of legislation, EU legislation, have been initiated since Britain was lured into the EU in 1975? 80,000. Good guess. Keep going. 90,000. Keep going. 100. Yeah, 122,000 pieces of legislation. How many of those have been put on the British statute books since 1975? 45. How many? 45. 45 is closer. No, the reality is that about 20,000 of the 122,000 pieces of legislation have got onto the statute books. Why? Because we haven't got enough civil servants to rubber stamp them. And that's the only reason they're not in the UK statute books, is because they're not rubber stamped. But ostensibly, because EU law effectively has supremacy over UK law, the fact that it hasn't been stamped into UK law yet is almost an irrelevance. And yet, we're not told this, are we, really? No? Why do you think that Parliament is empty for the entire week except for 12 noon on a Wednesday? And the only time people make the effort to go to Parliament is 12 noon on Wednesday, because they know that on 12 noon on Wednesday, a significant chunk of the population, a few percentage points, watch the media coverage of Prime Minister's questions, the zoo. But the rest of the week, you're lucky if there's half a dozen people actually in the chamber. It's a charade, a total charade for the masses, that's all, just to keep the masses thinking that there is some kind of democratic process in this country. Europe is an agenda. It's a long-standing agenda. It's an agenda that is now almost 100 years old, almost exactly 100 years old, because we can actually trace it back to the 1920s. And this is the guy, and in fact, I think it was Max that mentioned this guy in his presentation. This is Count Coudenhove-Kalergi, who wrote a number of books in the immediate years post First World War. He's an Austrian count. And I'll paraphrase, but the primary template is a book called Pan-Europa. And basically, his game plan was to destroy the homogeneity of Europe, to destroy the nation states of Europe. And what he said was that you should destroy the mass population, reduce their education to a minimal level, and create a mongoloid European state ruled by the traditional aristocracy and the spiritual elite. And I have quoted that last sentence. The traditional aristocracy and the spiritual elite. Who do you think he was referring to when he referred to the spiritual elite? The Zionists, ostensibly at that time. The Zionists. That's who he was referring to. And of course, the Zionist agenda had been established by Theodor Herzl about 35 years previously. Count Coudenhove-Kalergi. So yeah, this is a guy who writes a book. Yeah, it's just a book. Doesn't have any basis in current policy. Well, let me just introduce you to Peter Sutherland. Anybody come across this sociopath? He's an Irishman by accident at birth. I'm amazed that... where's our pyromaniacs? This is the guy, he was the youngest Attorney General of Ireland. That launched his political career. He then went on to become an EU commissioner. He chaired the GATT talks in the early 90s. He was the founding Director General of the World Trade Council. And he was chairman of BP, chairman of Goldman, he's still chairman of Goldman Sachs International. He was on the board of Royal Bank of Scotland when it collapsed. This guy, the interconnectivity is just something else. But he is also responsible for advising member countries of the EU on immigration. And this is a quote from an interview that he gave to the BBC on June 21st, 2012. And he said the EU should do its best to undermine the homogeneity of its member states. Peter Sutherland told peers the future prosperity of many EU states depends on them becoming multicultural. He also suggests the UK government's immigration policy has no basis in international law. Basically, open your doors and let them all in. Well, who
was he speaking to at that point?
The House of Lords. So we still nurse a sense of our homogeneity and difference from others. And that's precisely what the European Union, in my view, should be doing its best to undermine. He destroyed Ireland. This is the guy who wasn't physically present, but he was behind the meeting that took place between Brian Cowen, Brian Lenihan, and the Attorney General, the head of AIB, the Bank of Ireland, on September 28th, I think it was, 2008, where he effectively instructed the Irish government to underwrite all the assets and liabilities of the Irish banks, effectively condemning the state to bankruptcy. That was his job. Yeah? And this is what he had to do. He had to destroy his own country to establish his loyalty. So it comes back to what I say. These guys, they work on the basis that the more they do to further the agenda, then the higher up the pecking order they come back when they reincarnate in their perverse belief system. Let's get a bit closer to home, though. Peter Mandelson openly stating, immigrants We sent out search parties to get them to come and made it hard for Britons to get work. CEOs love this because it means that they can reduce their employee costs. You know, once upon a time, employee costs, particularly in the manufacturing business, would average about 25 to 30% of total revenue. So it was the biggest single outgoing for a manufacturing company. Automation, of course, has helped to reduce that, but so has availability of labor. Minimum wage and 0 hours contract. Both are abominations. I saw a statistic just 2 days ago from the Institute of Directors that said that for every 100 immigrants that get work in this country, 25 UK nationals are put out of work. Now, this is not a one-dimensional issue by any stretch of the imagination. Don't get me wrong. We have created, the collective we, have created a horrendous mess in the Middle East, an area that I love. I lived there for 4 years in the early 90s, traveled extensively. My territory was everything between Egypt in the southwest and Iran in the northeast. Wonderful people, wonderful cultures. And we have allowed our governments to destroy these cultures. And they're not going to stop anytime soon. So we have a responsibility to the people that we're bombing out of their homes. But that doesn't mean to say that we should open the doors. There's other ways to deal with responsibility. And we've always had immigration. We've always had people from other countries coming into this country on a needs basis, where there's been jobs or skills that we don't have in this country that we've needed to bring in from outside. Absolutely. That's part of, transfer of knowledge, transfer of skills, and, our own broader education. When I went and lived in these countries, I took it as an opportunity to experience the culture. I didn't try and change the culture. Neither did I embed myself in it. I didn't actually wear the dish dash, in the UAE. Didn't have one my colour. But it didn't mean to say I had to embed myself in the culture, but, the two could coexist. I had something that they wanted, and, in return, I got to live a pretty nice lifestyle out there. But then it was time for me to leave. I will also readily acknowledge there were things that you had to do this to live in the Middle East. Their policy of using third country nationals for a lot of the construction work, no health and safety practices. You see the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Filipinos climbing up to build these buildings on bamboo scaffolding in bare feet, no hard hats. And just as a contract had finished, and the prime contractor, the local partner, would be responsible for paying for all of the airfares to ship these people home, there'd be a terrible, horrendous fire in the shanty towns where these people lived in the desert. It's not all pretty, for sure. But at the end of the day, I was a guest. I was a guest in that country. And if I didn't like it, I could leave. Well, ultimately I did. But I'm not suggesting that everything is wonderful, but does it give us the right to bomb these cultures into the Stone Age? I don't think so. This is a deliberate policy to destroy EU nation states, to destroy national homogeneity, to mongrelize Europe, exactly as spelled out by Kalergi in 1920. In the EU, there is a Coudenhove-Kalergi award that is given to the politician that is deemed to have done the most to further this policy of undermining EU national homogeneity. You want to guess who have been a few of the winners of this? Who? Merkel, yes. Yes. Blair, yes. Peter Sutherland, twice. Yeah. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, does it? And did we see this on the front pages of the national press? Tony Blair awarded Coudenhove-Kalergi Award. No, of course not. Of course not. So we've got to find a balance. So what's going to happen on the 23rd? Well, we're going to take time out of work. Who's going to vote? Yeah, okay. Listen, I actually believe my counsel on this is that we have to vote. Let's not make it easy for them, right? If we don't participate in the process, then once again, we're just handing it to them on a plate. They don't care why we don't participate. They don't care why we don't vote as long as we don't. If everybody who didn't vote in the last 2 elections had voted for the same party, that party would now be in power. It's a party that doesn't exist, obviously. But that's the magnitude of the apathy in this country, or the conscious decision. And I do understand some people's conscious decision not to vote. And I readily acknowledge that I'm open to be labelled a hypocrite because I'm not on an electoral register because I don't have a fixed address. But if you are on an electoral register, then vote. Don't make it easy for them. Let's make it more difficult for them to manipulate so that the manipulation becomes more obvious. And then more people will actually see what's occurring. So a lot of people believe that the manipulation is going to be to keep us in. And that may well be an outcome. I certainly haven't read the definitive script on this. That may well be an outcome. And if that is the case, we have a big problem. We have a real problem. Because that will be the first time since 1975 that the British people will have effectively given the British government a mandate to basically say, let's not pussyfoot around anymore, let's go the whole hog. And that whole hog is going to be unfolded at a phenomenal rate of knots. But I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I don't think that's enough for these sociopaths who want the European superstate and want the destruction of the national homogeneity of the European countries. So I will not be at all surprised if the ballot is either let go as we think it might unfold, i.e. that the vote is to come out, or that it is manipulated to bring us out. So what will be the purpose of that? Because people go, yes, we need to come out. Okay. Problem there is that then this government will no longer be constrained by any of that sugarcoating that's in the EU legislation that we are using today. And I suspect that the opportunity through things like the Extremism Act, it's a bill now, but it will be an act, will be used to wipe out, shut down, incarcerate any dissent in this country. If we come out after the June ballot, there is a very good possibility that this country will be deliberately destroyed. The purpose being to create a situation where in, let's say, 7 to 10 years, the population of this country are gagging to get back in. And at that point, it'll be a case of, okay, well, you can come back in, but this time it will be on our terms. You will subjugate the nation state in totality. Apart from the City of London, of course. Now, they, of course, will be relying at that point on a continued non-participation. So if that is the prognosis, there will be a massive responsibility on the people of this country to take their country back. And that I'm not suggesting, this is not a far right take the country back. This is bring sanity to the country, sanity to an economic policy, sanity to a financial strategy, effectively do an Iceland. I mean, how sad is that? We got a country that's 300,000 people, and basically, that's the country that's really the model. It's set up the model financial system. It's outside, or slowly being clawed back already, but it's outside of the global central banking system. So once we're out, we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. Hell of a lot of work. Because if we just do sit back and go, oh, thank God we're out, believe you me, it's not going to be pretty. Does this sound plausible? So, again, it comes down to sowing the seeds. Yes, we do have to come out. In my opinion, we do have to come out. Because if we don't come out, then we have gifted. We've been lured by the sugarcoating, and then we'll effectively end up in the same situation as Greece and Ireland and Spain and Portugal. And if we think we've got austerity in this country right now, we ain't seen nothing yet. We ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I just want to throw in something on the immigration debate. Because let me just ask you a question. How many people here create a hypothetical country? Hypothetical country. Let's say that country had an economy where a bus driver could earn something in the region of about £3,000 a week. Who'd be up for that? Yeah, who would consider emigrating or even just going abroad for a couple of years on their own, leave the family at home, because they could earn £3,000 plus a week as a bus driver? Yeah? Okay, £12,000 a month, £144,000 a year. That's about 6.5, 7 times the average national wage in this country, which is about £22,500, allegedly. Well, but that's why we have a massive immigration issue. Because for people who live in a lot of the developing nations, African nations, Middle Eastern nations, to come here and get a job as, say, a bus driver, they're earning the equivalent of 6 and 7 times what they can earn in their own country. So, of course, they're going to make an effort to come here. Who can blame them for that? You know? Of course. So, I don't hold anything against those individuals for wanting to better the lives of themselves and their families, because we would do the same if we had the same opportunity in this fictional country. So, of course, they're going to come here. And if we open the borders completely, then I could assure you that, we've got a situation at the moment where more people are earning minimum wage or are on 0 hours contracts than ever since records began. But if we go into the EU on a fully fledged basis, it's going to grow exponentially. And what you're going to have is a massive distortion in the earnings. So you're going to have your CEOs and the officers of companies who are going to probably double, treble what they're already earning, because the profitability of the company will go exponential because they're able to reduce all their employee costs and associated costs with that. So how are you going to vote? Do vote, though. Don't tell me how you... Do vote. If you have the opportunity to vote, please do vote. The Kalergi plan. And, of course, we have all of the manipulation. And notice the colors here. Notice the colors. The red, white, and blue. I mean, obviously, this was classic PR. It is a tragedy. There's no question it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy of our creation. But it's being used to undermine everything about our lives. This is a game of global monopoly. And I've, showed these pics on many presentations. This, of course, is from Brick Lane in 2012. A wonderful piece of street art. The global banksters playing their game Monopoly on the backs of humanity. Meanwhile, they create this massive public debt. To whom? To whom? The banksters, yeah. It's fake debt. And, here it is. Spelt out for us, isn't it? You've all seen this by now, haven't you? This was the artwork that was used in France, in the Netherlands, and in Ireland, on the bus shelters, on the posters, on the street, to promote membership of the EU. Yet, on careful examination, what do we see? Here's the inner sanctum, the Tower of Babel. Yeah. Mirroring, of course, Strasbourg. Yeah. Here we have the sociopaths, those who have prostituted themselves, those who, in return for the trinkets, in return for the titles, in return for the lifestyle, will do whatever it is that they're asked to do. Would they sell their mother? Would they kill their youngest child? Oh, maybe they have. You know, Gordon Brown, David Cameron. Looking longingly across. What have we got to do to get in the inner sanctum? They'll never get in there. They'll never get in there. It doesn't matter what they do. They will never get in there. You know, there's no word in the English language, well, no polite word, to describe these guys. But the National Socialists had the term Kapo, Kampfpolizei. You know, in the ghettos, they appointed senior members of the community to administer the ghetto, to be responsible for the allocation of housing, for food, and of course for providing the lists for transshipment to the work camps and whatever else. And yet, when the ghetto was emptied, where did they go? Yeah, they were on the last truck out. They went the same way, because those in the inner sanctum treat these people, I believe, with even more contempt than the masses. But here we have the masses depicted, and you can see how they're depicted, yeah? The blockheads, they're all depicted as blockheads, except one, the baby. The baby here is the only one with any kind of normal features. The blockheads, telling us what they're doing. You know, their goal is to make sure that by the time any human entering this physical realm, by the time they get to young adulthood, they're a blockhead. You know, they are literally a slave to the system, cannon or factory fodder. It's all out there, spelt out. Now, I, for one, am certainly not proud of the legacy that we are leaving for future generations. You know, I mean, it is an absurdity. You know, the corporatocracy. And it's spelt out for us. Many people have tried to spell it out. You know, the establishment is walking us in to the barcode in every way, shape, or form. And as has been discussed through the weekend, you know, they're literally trying to completely shut down any understanding or access to the right brain. I mean, Holly touched it. Holly referenced Tony Wright. Amazing guy. In fact, I have to have Tony Wright to speak at a future AV event. And if you haven't read Tony Wright's book, Left in the Dark, I absolutely recommend this book. You know, Left in the Dark, and what Tony's really working on is his research into the efforts made by the establishment to completely lock us in to the left hemisphere of our brain and shut down the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere, of course, is that transmitter-receiver that is very limited in its frequency bandwidth and locks us into this three-dimensional charade and completely shuts down our capacity to connect with everything on the wider scale. And once we are able to cross the corpus callosum, the more time we're able to spend in the right side of the brain, the more of a problem we are to the establishment. So we have it all to play for. We really do. Not for ourselves, but for future generations. You know, and at the same time, you know, I do relate to what Zen said last night. You know, in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. It will be what it will be. But does that mean to say that we just sit back and... Because if we don't get it right this time, if we don't sort it out this time, guess what? You're coming back. And you want to do this again? So let's make the effort, you know, and really try to bring about the changes that we all know we need to see, but without the existential attachment. Because the moment that you do have that existential attachment, then you're limiting the potential outcome. You know, there's a wonderful quote from David Monk in my documentary, Voices from the Gas Fields.
If at this point in time you can stand in front of a drill rig, then stop it from getting on. The easiest drill rig to stop's the first one. The hardest one will be the 10,000th. It'll be more than that though in the UK, because you're doing shale over there predominantly. Shale needs a lot of wells, leads a lot of destruction, poisons a lot of water.
If this gets the tiniest foothold, you know, you're done. So it's now or it's never. Don't think that you've got that long, because it's now or never. So you do it now, you stand up now, and you find something within yourself that you didn't think was there. You know, that's the important thing. You will be confronted by police. They wear their Kevlar suits and it's a big intimidation thing.
Hey, you've got nobody in front of you. Keep walking. You're delaying this lady. Keep going. Don't push back on her. Keep moving. Now. If you've got to keep going. Keep moving.
It's up to the people of the UK to get their cameras in the face of the Kevlar security, the Kevlar police who are paid by the corporations. And we have to say no. That's all it is. But it's more than just saying no at a meeting. It's intent. It's the intent of no. It's the knowing that you mean no. That's when you will be unbelievably powerful. You come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you.
Where he makes the observation, he says, you come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we're not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody else is looking out for you. It's you. It's every one of us. And if we don't put in the effort, then we are, directly or indirectly, however you want to perceive it, making a contribution to the sociopathic global corporatist agenda of total global dominion and subjugation of humanity until such time as they're able to go through the process of transhumanism and create the droids that they need to support their system, and the rest can just disappear. Marcus Aurelius, a warrior, spirit, and philosopher of the 2nd century AD, he said, what we do in life ripples through eternity. So don't think for one moment that any action that we take is not relevant or not important. It doesn't matter how much or how little you do. Yeah, we've all got other lives that we have to take care of. We've got family responsibilities. And of course, they have to take priority. But we can all find an extra bit of time. And it doesn't matter what you choose to get involved in, because there's so many issues and none of us can get involved in everything, God forbid. So it doesn't matter what you pick up on, whether it's the geoengineering, whether it's the GM foods, whether it's the unconventional gas agenda, whether it's the fluoride in the water, whether it's the financial system, whether it's getting involved in the politics. I mean, go and, for some people, get in there, get in among, go join your local Conservative or Labour Party. Infiltrate them as they try to infiltrate us. There are no rules in this game except be true to your own humanity. And somebody, I think it was a golfer, who said, it's really interesting. He said, the more I practice, the better I seem to get. And it's the same with everything. The more you practice, if you find out that something's working, then you don't necessarily need to go and shout it from the rooftops, perhaps. If you know it works, and you know that you can use that in some way, then use it. We have access to a phenomenal range of tools. We have access to a phenomenal range of creativity. The away team don't. They are actually very limited in what they can do by their own rules, by their own procedures, by their own statutes. There's way more of us than there is of them. And I absolutely know that we will come through. It's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. If it was easy, then we wouldn't be here. It's a learning as well. Let's maximize this learning opportunity, because I have no idea where we take that learning, but I know we take it somewhere. And that learning is going to be extremely crucial to us and to future generations. So thank you very much for participating in AV7. Thank you.